Hello everyone, so here we are with another video of CIA part 2, and today we will be discussing about unit 6, which is about information gathering. This is a brief introduction about my experience and my qualification. If you're just interested in knowing me and my career trajectory, you can just pause this video and read it yourself. And let's move on to the next slide. Our today's video is about Unit 6, which is information gathering, which covers approximately 14% of the entire CIA Part 2 syllabus. It's a good news because this is not so tough. It's not so technical. It is just a basic information that you should know that what should be your sources of information while performing your audit engagement. Approximately 14 MCQs out of 100 comes from this section, which is a very good news because the earlier sections which we have covered, other than internal audit plan, the first three are relatively very extensive in knowledge, very technical, and the good news is that their percentage is relatively less. It doesn't mean that you can skip that. It's just that it's a relief for part 2 CIA part 2 exam students. So this is an amazing news. So far we have covered till unit 1 till unit 5, which approximately made 40% of the entire syllabus. So today, after finishing today's unit, we will be somewhere near to almost 55% of the entire syllabus, which means that half of the paper of CIA you would be able to perform, or you will be able to apply your concept to. Remaining units are Unit 7, Unit 8, and Unit 9. Again, it's a cycle, so it's part of the same process which we have started. So initially you have annual internal audit plan, then you plan your each individual engagements, then you gather information, you perform your audit procedures, sampling and statistical procedures, then you analyze the information, you evaluate, you document, and then this all your working needs to be reviewed by the supervisor. So this chapter follows the same sequence. Then you communicate your results, your work, through internal audit reports, and finally you monitor the progress. There are two things of monitoring the progress. The first thing is about whether the auditee or the client has implemented those recommended controls or not. This is called follow-up in a technical term. And secondly, monitoring the progress of overall internal audit department, internal auditors, through performance management. So in order to ensure that we continuously evolve, we continuously improve, we do not stay back and become irrelevant to the company. So from chapter 4 to chapter 9 is a sequence. So I will highly recommend that you follow the same sequence because it makes much more sense. This is a mind map for you to understand that what are the key critical topics that we will be covering in this entire unit. So this is for those people who are visual learners. I'm a visual learner. I prefer to draw diagrams and pictures, and this is just one example. Basically, when I used to study, I used to have the diagram for the entire book. So I know that if a topic comes, it is from which branch of under which chapter or under which concept this is coming. I struggle initially in my studies because I could not memorize too much of information if it is in textual form. Then in my ACC I just discovered that this is how I'm more comfortable in learning the new concepts. So till date I use it even in my work, and this is scientifically proven that a picture is better than 1,000 words. So this is just to give you an depiction of that, how you can make things easy for your mind to grasp the information. Well, what we will be covering in this entire unit, we will be covering about the quality of information, what are the quality attributes of the information, the sources of information, about the questionnaires which we can use as a mode for obtaining the information. We can use interviewing techniques as a mode of using or obtaining the information, and there are some other methodologies that we can deploy to gather the information. In order for an internal auditor to achieve its audit engagement objective, it is important that the information which we are obtaining, on which we will be performing our audit procedure, is of very high quality. As the saying goes, if it is garbage in, garbage out. So if you have a bad quality of information, the results and the conclusion which you draw, or the opinion which you made, will be of a bad quality, which will eventually not add value to the organization. It's a waste of resources. One of the critical important topics which we have studied in the internal audit charter, when we were discussing about the internal audit charter, it was that the internal auditor, they specify their authority and responsibility towards having access to the entire to the most relevant and the desired information within the company in terms of information, resources, or personnel. And just in case if you encounter a situation as an auditor, which we quite often encounter, where people are not happy to help the auditor to contribute towards the auditor's engagement objectives, just because of the inherent fear of that the issues will be highlighted in the audit report, and eventually the audit report goes to a very highest level within the organization. So if the management is restricting you from accessing any of information, then we draw a scope limitation conclusion, which means that we do not give our opinion on that particular area of the business. What should be the quality of information? What should be the attributes of the information? These are, the information needs to be sufficient, which means it has to be factual, adequate, and convincing for our audit procedure purpose. Reliability. The reliability means that any third person, whether it be you or any other person who reviewed this information, they reach out to the same conclusion, because they feel that this information is of a high quality. Relevance means that this information is relevant to the audit engagements which you are performing. If I'm doing a payroll audit, I need the salaries related information, I need the deduction, what are the key deductions that are being carried out from the salaries of individuals, what are the key perks that are being given, what are the associated policies and procedure with that. But I do not need at that point of time any information related to fixed asset. I do not need any information related to inventory of the company. So this is how we draw a line that the information which we are either asking or reviewing is of a relevance to the audit engagement. Usefulness, obviously, the purpose of having all this analysis is to meet the audit engagement objectives, and thus we try to reach or to obtain or contribute towards the entire organizational objectives. So that usefulness should always be there as an attribute in the analysis of the information. What type of information generally internal auditor asks is based on their professional experience, their competence in that area, and the particular situation. I might be needing a certain kind of information in one company, but I might not ask the same question in the another company, because there might be possibly the laws are different, or both companies are in different geography, and the system the company has deployed is different. It could be many other reasons why the same information might not be useful in the another situation. However, you will look for the information which is more applicable in that particular situation. When you're working either in a public practice or with a consultancy firm or a very diversified group, you will encounter time and again that there are so many companies, there are so many diversities. Some companies are making products, some companies are selling services. So despite the process as a whole remain the same, the HR, the marketing, the sales, but there are nitty-gritty details which differ from industry to industry, sector to industry, and sector to sector. So that elements you need to take into account when you are seeking out for any information from the client in order to fulfill your engagement objective. When it comes to the sources of information, you have internal information, which is about any document that is generated within the company and remains within the company. Payroll related information is generally a very good example. There might be performance assessment of employees, might be another good example of having internal information. Then we have internal external information, which means that the information is generated internally within the company and then move out and then go out of the company. One of the example is the check, that the checks which we issue, maybe for paying the wages of employees or maybe for making some certain kind of a payment. There could be other as well. For example, we made a sale, so we are now generating an invoice, sales invoice for our customers. So that could be an internal external, because that information is generated within the company and then move out of the company. Then there is another source of information, which is external internal information, which means that now we are buying some products from someone, maybe a raw material for processing and then making our final product. In that case, the external supplier, they send us the invoices and that information comes from them, and then we process it and then we make the payment. So that is an example of external internal information. External, then there is a exclusively an external information, which means we only carry out with the external party. This happen in balance confirmation in the financial audit. For example, if you want to confirm that all the receivables which has been stated in the company balance sheets are of genuine nature, then these receivables are standing at the debtors level as well. So what you do, that you send to each, or maybe select on a sample basis a few high number or a random number through any statistical techniques, a few samples of customers whose balances are showing in the books, and then send them the figure that do you agree that you owe this much of amount to the company. And there are positive confirmation and negative confirmation. The positive confirmation is where they have to reply whether they agree or they disagree. Negative confirmation is where they have to only reply if they disagree with the balance amount which we have stated against them. The same procedure we can apply for payables as well. So this is an example of external information. Outsourcing information is if we outsource our IT systems, or if we outsource our janitorial system, if we outsource our security system, maybe the premises security system. So anything that we outsource that we have to obtain from an outsourced partner is generally known as an outsourced information. These sources of information are very important, because when you are auditing an area of the business, then naturally you will fall either one or maybe multiple source of information that you have to obtain. Just to give you an example, when I was doing an IT audit, our IT was fully outsourced. Obviously, there were certain elements of IT that we were managing in-house, so I obtained the information internally, and then I obtained the information from outsource partner. Then in the same engagement, we were making payments to these individuals, so that was internal external information, and these outsource partners, they were sending us invoice for making those payments, so that was external internal information. So in that overall engagement, I come across, I have to reach out of all the sources of information, and one of the external information was they were having their own audits on their services. So I also obtained that report from them, just to see that when they audited the services which they are providing to us, were there any findings. So that was purely an external information. So in one engagement, I come across all the sources of information. So this might happen to you. Sometimes you might be needing one or two sources of information, maybe, and sometimes you might be needing all sources of information. Whenever we are carrying out either audit engagement or fraud investigation, or even in advisory assignments, we come across different form of evidences. When we analyze that information, when we obtain and we analyze, we try to a certain objective out of that information. For example, if we are looking to prove something against someone, so we might have witnesses and we obtain the testimonial from those witnesses. That information will be direct evidences. If we take oral, that will be less conclusive, but if we take a written where they also sign on their testimony, then that will be more conclusive and more persuasive information. But that nature of information is called direct evidences. In audit engagement, we obtain many types of direct information: the workings a person has performed, the entries they have made, in order to understand the process. So anything that the process owner is doing, and that information which you take it to review, that is known as direct evidences. Circumstantial evidences are the evidences which are indirect in nature. For example, someone steals something from a premises, and there you find a broken door or a broken alarm system, or you have found that any other circumstantial evidence that maybe that day it was off, so no one was there. So these are the information which are not direct in nature, but they support the direct evidences. So generally in interrogation, or in crime investigation, or criminal proceedings, or fraud investigation, circumstantial evidence plays a very vital role, because then it provides more authenticity to the claims which you are making. Conclusive evidence is where you can have no two opinions. For example, you find a watch in the desert. It means a human being walk over that desert. For example, you find the fingerprint of a person. Maybe there is something that has been stolen from a place, and you find that the fingerprint doesn't matches with the employees of the company. So it means that someone from the outside, they came there. So these are called conclusive evidences, where we cannot have two opinion about. Corroborative evidences are similar to circumstantial evidences. They help in making an opinion about an claim. So it would be that one employee who was the last person in the office, when he went out, something wrong happened, and while he was the only employee and he left in the last, that is being evidences, or that is being witnesses by the watchman of the company, that this was the person I saw and he was the last person before that incident happened. Maybe it's of incident of breakout, or maybe an incident of anything else. So that testimony or that information which the watchman provide is a corroborative evidence of that there is a possibility that this person have some knowledge, or this person might be directly or indirectly involved in that incident. Correct? So that is corroborative evidences. So these are the nature of information in audit. We, without even realizing what is the nature of the audit, we just follow the procedure when we are in the routine. However, at the back of our mind, these all stories, these all classification goes by. But whenever you are doing a forensic audit, for example, I'm a certified fraud examiner and I read it in very detailed the manuals. So whenever you are doing forensic audits or fraud investigation, there you have to be very cautious about these nature of information. Why? Because your claims are being taken to the court, or there is legal proceedings. So there is a very high level of evidences, the classification, the trails, the chain of information. This all matters a lot, because then there are third party who are evaluating the entire situation and they have to come up with the judgment, the court system. So that's why you have to be mindful of these kind of information, be it audit or outside audit, but generally you need to have a very good understanding of different nature of information. So here we further classify different forms of evidences. We know that the physical information will be anything that physically available, be it in the form of assets, where you can just look and have count the asset, or look at the physical condition of the assets when you pass on the property, so you know this property belongs to physically to someone. When you review the documents, where you can see it's tangible, so that is all form of physical information. Testimonial information we discussed earlier. It is most of a testimony, the spoken statement of an individual as a witness. It could be written or it could be spoken. Documentary evidences are more in the form of documents within the company. It could be management reporting, it could be accounting records. So this is all falls into documentary information. Analytical information is where you take the information, you apply different ratios, or you look for different trends, and then you conclude something. For example, the sales were the gross profit was 10%, or let's say that is too less, 40% of the entire sales for last 5 years, and in 1 year it become from 40 to maybe 20%. So there is a dramatic drop, 50% drop in the gross profit, which means the cost of sales has dramatically increases. So this kind of ratios, they give us an indication to where to look more and dig down our efforts. So anything that is in the routine, we take it just normal, though we review that area as well, but our more focus is toward if we find any anomaly in the trend. Level of persuasiveness of evidences. So not all evidences or the sources of information we will categorize as of same quality. Physical examination, if you look at something, that is more persuasive. But if you look at directly a person when he's performing their duty and producing that information, it is more persuasive than the physical evidence merely without looking at how the person performed their job. Then any information that is originated from the third party, because they are more independent, and there is less likely that they will manipulate the information. It is also persuasive. However, any information that is provided internally within the company, just because of the assumption that the management have a full control over the information, they might alter the information, or they might not provide the complete information. So we consider it as a little bit less persuasive, though it's still a good quality information. An example I would quote, for example, the company say they have a 1 million of account receivable, and so that is somewhat persuasive. But when you verify that information from the customers and they agree that they owe 1 million to the company, then that becomes more persuasive, because now you can tally the internal information with the external party without them knowing that how much or what information you have in hand. So this is different kind of evidences or sources of information, and different level of persuasive in audit engagement or fraud investigations. Whenever you as an auditor encounter a situation where the information which is provided to you is either incomplete or insufficient or of a bad quality, in that in that scenarios, what you can do is your first job should be to analyze the information and see the effect of that information on overall engagement objective. It is something very minute which doesn't have a big significance. Then you can use your professional judgment that is it required to escalate that matter to the higher authorities or to stay quiet. But if you can obviously use some audit procedure from alternative means, it's not always the case that we get whatever we want. So we use some alternative information where it can corroborate with the overall objective of that audit activity. It could be circumstantial evidences that we may further try to obtain. We can use supportive information. So these are audit techniques which you learn over the time. Or sometimes you try to not bother the client, but to get the information from the external party if that is possible. Anyways, if you feel that the information is incomplete or of not a good quality or it is insufficient, then in that case you can analyze it, see the impact, and try to give any opinion on that particular area of the business in which you are performing your audit procedures, because you do not have enough information to draw a conclusion, so you avoid giving any conclusion on that area. In practical work, whenever you come across such kind of a situation, what you do is that you reach out to the higher management within that hierarchy. For example, if you're dealing with a procurement manager and he's not helping you with certain providing you with certain kind of information without a proper genuine justification, then you reach out to the head of the department, maybe the head of procurement. If that is not the case, maybe the head of procurement is working under the CFO, so you reach out to the CFO. If that is not working, then you reach out to the CEO. If still the matter is not closed, then you escalate that matter to the audit committee, either at that point of time if it is very critical. If it is not that critical, then you make a scope limitation with an audit report, and while presenting your audit report to the audit committee or to the board, you highlight that area where you are being not provided enough information. Questionnaire is the mode by which we try to obtain the information. Questionnaire we use in the organization where we need to collect the input from a lot of number of people on the same matter. So rather than going individually to each individuals and then getting out in an interview and or obtaining the information, it's time consuming as well, resources consuming as well. So what we do, we list down all the queries or all the type of the question or all the input, the information that we require, and we send it to across the board to all the individuals and wait for their responses. Questionnaires are also useful in organizations which are more rigid, which are where there are more bureaucracy, where people fear to come up openly and speak out on what they feel and if they want to come up with any opinions. So in that case, we can use an anonymous questionnaire just to gauge the control environment and to collect the information from them. It could be anonymous, or it could be by stating or reaching out to each individual by their name. But questionnaire has its own limitation. I wouldn't call a disadvantage, but it has its own limitation. It's an amazing tool which we use in our audit procedure, but the limitation could turn into disadvantage. Difficult to prepare. So a read information which you read, which I read, we might interpret the question into our own biases, or into our own based on our own judgment. So that could be lead to different answers on the same question, unless until the questions are very clear. Time consuming, obviously, to draft all the relevant questions so we can obtain the relevant information, because if you ask a wrong question, then you will get a wrong answer. So that might lead to more time consuming. Not suitable for every circumstances. Absolutely, you might have to use some other audit procedures to or sources of information to a certain thing. So it might not be applicable in all kind of situation. For example, if you want to ensure that all the assets are physically available on the floor, so you have to physically need to visit, rather than sending a questionnaire to an individual and saying, yeah, tick mark. It doesn't make sense. Less effective than interview. Obviously, interview is more effective because people sometimes they more open up one-to-one interviews, depending on the organizational culture or individual personality. But if you build the trust, people will more come up with the or they will more open up to you. I personally observed that there are a lot of information which the auditor or the process owner, they give you in interview rather than in writing. They don't want to be made accountable for that information, because sometimes it's a hearsay. Sometimes they have the information, but they do not have the valid documentation to support that kind of allegations or that type of statements. So they rather prefer to give you the information verbally with obviously with certain kind of precautions. But if you ask the same question over the emails, they will not respond. So that interview might be more effective, or analytical procedure at times might be more effective than reaching out on questionnaires. Interviewing is another technique by which we can obtain information for our audit purpose. Interview can be performed at multiple stages. At the start of the engagement, when we reach out to people and we interview them, it is mainly because to understand the system. So in preliminary interviews, we understand the processes, the systems, what their role is. Once we understand, then we ask for some information, and then once we review the information, and if we have further clarification, or if we need more information, we reach out to them again to set up another interview in which we gather the facts. After the facts, if we come across some issues or certain kind of additional information, then we carry out a follow-up interview. And once we concluded our audit procedures on that area and there is nothing more to review, then we draw our conclusion on the gaps, on the areas where further improvement can be made, where there are errors, where there are system gaps, control weaknesses, and that we highlight in the form of audit observation, and we state to the management in our exit interview. And there, the purpose is not to discuss on the issues, but to discuss more on the recommendation and how to manage that situation. So now we already know the problem is being established with the client, and Based on our experience, we give them a recommendation, and sometimes they agree, sometimes they have their own way of mitigating or managing those risks, and they come up with their own. But the overall purpose is to manage the risk to a tolerable level. So if that happens, then we are happy, they are happy. So overall, we carry out on the interview to gather the facts during our audit procedures. But in forensics audits, it is about to prove or disapprove a claim. So there might be that whether the person is guilty or not guilty. So the objective of gathering the information change. But in audit engagement, it is more about gathering the fact to draw our conclusion. An auditor can learn or can be sharp enough to know his environment. So whenever I'm working as an auditor and I visit a client, everything I observe, somehow it helps me. My observation, my instincts, everything helps me in carrying out the audit. For example, how the people are behaving, how open that environment is, what is the information systems they are using, how the people are following the procedures, what about the passwords and protections, does people come on time or not. If I'm visiting a facility in terms of production facility, I will look for cleanliness, I will look for vestiges, I will look for safety measures, I will look for how employee embark on their day-to-day work activity. So observation is an amazing tool by which we can gather so much of information. It could be through observing people when they are doing their job, right? Internal surveys, again, it is similar to the questionnaires, but you can use it like interchangeably as well. But the purpose of survey is to conclude something out of maybe there is a situation. For example, you feel that the overall control environment of the you just want to determine whether the control environment of the organization is robust enough to data fraud or not. So you will carry out a survey just to see whether that assumptions which you have made is proven or disapproved. You might say that the employees are not happy or employees are happy and satisfied. You will just send the survey to them and just to prove or disapprove the analogy. Sorry. So this could be another form of gathering information. Here we are at the end of our presentation and the end of our entire unit. Unit 6, which was about information gathering. It's pretty simple. Grasp the knowledge from the text. Listen to this video 1 or 2 times before you start attempting the MCQs, and I hope this helped you a lot. This was an incentive video for you because this information gathering is pretty simple. Then what is coming in the next unit? The next unit of in this part 2, I personally consider is one of the toughest one. It will be even challenging for me to explain it to you in a simple words, but I will try to give my best shot. And till then, I wish you good luck. Keep on working, and if you benefit, as always I say, do like and subscribe and share with other people so they also benefit from these videos, and hope to see you in the next video.